With only a few days away of the great day, Matan Torah Shavuot, where Rabotai, let's just get something really clear. As we've said so many times, the Chagim of Klal Yisrael are not commemorations. When we go through our holidays, they are not to commemorate something that took place in the past. Our Chagim is to relive an event again this year from what started and happened so many good years ago. And therefore, on Vav Sivan, just like originally, Matan Torah, we're going to be Zocheh Be'ezat Hashem again, this coming year on the night of Shavuot, to a new Matan Torah again. And therefore we got to prepare, we got to get ready. Just like the original Matan Torah, there was Shloshet Yemei Hagbala, there were 3 days of preparation. So too when it comes to every single year Shavuot, Matan Torah. It isn't a Chag you just show up to. It's a Chag you got to prepare for. And in truth, the Chinuch, he writes that was the reason why we have Sfirat HaOmer. The Sfirat HaOmer countdown between Pesach and Shavuot was to give us the opportunity to do just that. To count down, to long for, to await, to literally build up a certain yearning that something great is coming and it's worth the countdown. And I'm counting down to the great moment of this year's Matan Torah, this year's Shavuot. This year, I'm going to be Mekabel Torah even greater than ever before. And therefore, I need a Sfirat HaOmer. It's not a Chag you walk into. It's a Chag you count down to. So says the Chinuch. Because the way to acquire Torah is with a longing. It's with a wanting. The more you want it, the more you get it. Unlike any other chokhmah, unlike any other science or intellectual type of a system, Torah is very different. Every other system of knowledge, every other science, every other intellectual understanding of anything is always built on the person and his own IQ and intellect. The smarter he is, the more he attains. Torah is not like that. Torah was not given to people only that are intellectually advanced. Torah was given to the person that was so driven to want. And the more you want it, the more you'll get it. Doesn't matter how smart you are. Doesn't matter how intellectually advanced you are. It is the divine. It is literally the chokhmah, the da'at, the bina of Borei Olam. And Hashem gives it to the one who wants it most. Rabbi Eger was known to write that he got 2 teshuvot, 2 responsa, 2 questions of teshuvot, she'elot teshuvot, from 2 different rabbis. One rabbi was a genius, and the other rabbi was a very simple-minded Jew. And he couldn't believe, Rabbi Eger, that at the bottom of the maskana, of the psak, of these 2 responsa, these 2 rabbis came back down to the same bottom line halacha. He said, couldn't believe it. And it was from here that he said that the difference when it comes to Torah Chokhmah between the genius and the regular mind is only a difference of 2 candles. By any other Chokhmah you'll never find this. By Torah, it took the simple-minded guy just a little longer, 2 candles longer, but as long as he really is driven to want for it, he'll get to the same maskana, just a little bit longer. Because it's about the yearning. It's about the wanting. It's about the longing for it. That's a Sefer HaChinuch, is the reason for Sfirat HaOmer, leading up to Shavuot Matan Torah. Wow. Rabotai, Chafetz Chaim writes that Torah is compared to water. And this actually is a Ma'amar Chazal. The Gemara says, the Ma'amar Chazal, the Midrash writes, that Torah is domeh l'mayim in many different ways. Water always goes down to the lowest point of access. Torah always goes down to the most of the humble of people. Right? But there is another understanding, as there are many, that Chafetz Chaim wants to explain. Why is Torah nimshela l'mayim? Says the Chafetz Chaim, because there's a halakha that many people don't know about. If you have something stuck in your throat, and you grab a cup of water and you drink, do you make a beracha? No. You know what the halakha states? The halakha states, hashoteh mayim l'sima on. Somebody that drinks water because he's thirsty, mivarech. That's when he makes dash shakol nihiyah bidvaro. But if it's not for the sake of thirst, he doesn't make a bracha. Do you know that? Person has something stuck in his throat. Person wants to take a pill, and he needs something just to gulp the pill down. He's not thirsty. The water is there because he wants to simply gulp the pill down. A person is about to enter a ta'anit, a fast, and he wants to fill himself up with water. He's not thirsty. Not thirsty. He wants to fill himself up with water before the ta'anit so that he'll be hydrated entering the ta'anit to the next day. He does not make a beracha on that water. It's a halacha. Hashoteh mayim l'simaon. The only time you make a beracha on water is when you're thirsty. Says the Chafetz Chaim, Torah is just like water. The only time you see beracha in your Torah is when you're thirsty. You got to be thirsty. You got to really want it. If you just stop drinking, you know, I got something stuck in my brain. Let me just drink a cup of Torah. No, it doesn't work. There's no beracha there. There's no beracha. I got to go to school, routine. Because if I don't, I'm going to get suspended. I'm sitting there. The last place I want to be is learning that God for chas v'shalom to talk that way. But if there's no thirst, there's no beracha in the learning. Says the Chafetz Chaim, literally. Not only is it nimshela l'mayim, says the Chafetz Chaim, it mamish has the properties of the halachot l'mayim. When do you get beracha? When you're thirsty. You're not thirsty? Mafi, no beracha. No beracha in your learning. You got to be thirsty. You got to want it. You got to long for it. You got to really get the juices going. 1 day, 2 days. Sfirat HaOmer. Another day. Only 5 days left, 4 days left, 3 days left. I'm counting down to the great Matan Torah. This year I'm going to get bigger kochot. This year I'm going to get more kelim, greater kelim to be able to learn. Maybe this year Shavuot night I'll cry my eyeballs out when it comes to the tikkun, or when it comes to the learning, I'll be extra hatmada without wasting a second to show Hashem how much of Matan Torah this year I really want. I'm going to show up this year, Matan Torah, with suitcases, so that I will walk out with suitcases and suitcases maleh, filled with the siyata d'shmaya of this New Year's learning. Maybe at the end of the night, after I went through an amazing night of learning, I'll come to the morning of Matan Torah, the time that actually Matan Torah took place. And when it comes to Avinu, Ava Rahaman, Hamerachem Rachem Na'aleinu, V'ten b'libeinu bina lahavin, lahaskir, lishmoa, lilmor lamed, I'll actually give out a scream. Lilmor lamed, lishmo, v'lasot l'kayem, et kol divrei Talmud Toratecha v'ha'er eineinu b'toratecha. That morning is the moment of Matan Torah. We were up all night. Up all night. We accepted, we learned, we showed how much we want. But now is the moment of the cry out. Now is the moment where you beg for it. The moment of Matan Torah early morning. That shachrit that everyone has a hard time keeping their eyes open for. That Avinu Ava Rahman right before Shema. V'ha'er eineinu b'toratecha. Give a cry, give a yell, give a scream. That moment might be the ni'ilah for the siyata d'shmaya of your Torah for the all coming year. That's the moment of Matan Torah request. I'm coming this year with suitcases. I want to walk out with a bank robbery this year. I don't want to walk out with just another cup of water. I don't want to go through the motions of just showing up that night to learning, because if I don't, everyone's going to ask me, where were you? And I'm going to look bad. I want to come because I want to be there, because I want to learn. Find someone you want to learn with and learn the night of Shavuot. Find a rabbi that you enjoy his learning and let him prepare for you a steak that night. Egla tilta, a special steak. Let him prepare for you that night in learning. And eat it and enjoy it. Says the Chafetz Chaim, it's domel amayim. Only when you're thirsty is there blessing. And you know what? It's interesting, on the holiday of Shavuot, we have this incredible minhag. All of Klal Yisrael, no matter what your last name is, everybody has the minhag that they have some sort of a dairy, either meal or something of dairy on the Chag. And there are many reasons for this. The famous Chatam Sofer, what happened the morning of Matan Torah. But one reason, writes the Kolbo, and I heard this from Rabbi Gladstein, one reason, writes the Kolbo, is because Torah is described in the Pasuk as delicious. What type of ta'am of delicious does Torah have? Dvash v'chalav tachat l'shonech. The combination of dvash and chalav together is this magnificent, sweet, rich combination of flavor. And that's the flavor that Chazal tell us Torah has. That's the flavor that the Pasuk describes. Tachat l'shonech, under your tongue of the guy that sits and learns Torah. It's a delicacy, a delicious taste. And because of that, we eat some dairy to show the sweetness of what Torah was meant to be. I'd like to talk a little bit about that sweetness tonight. There's a famous Avnei Nezer. The Avnei Nezer wants to know, and this is something that the Taz actually talks about and asks as a stira in Shulchan Aruch. The Avnei Nezer wants to know that if a person goes and makes a neder, he makes a neder that he's not going to have any hana'ah from this lulav and etrog. Is he allowed to shake that lulav and etrog on the holiday of Sukkot? Yes or no? Says the Avnei Nezer, my friend, there's a famous concept in Shas. Mitzvot lav lehanot nitnu. Mitzvot were not given to you to have hana'ah. They were given to do. They were not given for you for your enjoyment purposes. They were given to you for your execution purposes. Execute. Get it done. Whether hana'ah or not is not the point. Mitzvot lav lehanot nitnu. And therefore, says Avnei Nezer, the guy made a neder that he's not going to have hana'ah from lulav and etrog. He can still shake the lulav and etrog and do the mitzvah, because the mitzvah of lulav and etrog has nothing to do with hana'ah. Very interesting. So now if that's the case, I want to ask you a question. What happens if somebody comes along and the Raman Shulchan Aruch paskins that if someone makes a neder, he's not going to have any enjoyment from this sefer? He's not going to have any enjoyment from this Gemara. You see this Gemara Shabbat? He made a neder that he's not going to have any hana'ah enjoyment from this book, from this sefer, Masechet Shabbat. Is he allowed to learn from that sefer? Well, according to what we just said, he should be allowed to learn from it, because if he made a neder not to have any enjoyment from lulav and etrog, and he's still allowed to shake it on Sukkot, because mitzvot have nothing to do with hana'ah. And when it comes to Talmud Torah, so he made a neder not to have any hana'ah from the sefer, the book of Torah. So he's going to go sit down and learn now this book, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. What does it have to do with hana'ah? So the halacha should be that you would be able to use the Sefer just like you'd be able to use Lulav and Etrog, because mitzvot have nothing to do with Hana'ah. So even if you made a neder, I'm not going to have Hana'ah from this mitzvah, you're still allowed to use it because mitzvot have nothing to do with Hana'ah. And yet we find the halacha is that when you make a neder not to have any Hana'ah from this Sefer, this particular book of Torah, the halacha is you're not allowed to use the Sefer. What's going on here? It's a stira. It's an open contradiction. The guy, Joe, you hear what we're saying? The guy makes a neder that he doesn't want to have any enjoyment from this lulav and etrog, and he's still allowed to use the lulav and etrog. Why? Because the mitzvah has nothing to do with enjoyment. The mitzvah you got to do regardless if you enjoy it or not. It's a commandment, for heaven's sake. That's why it's called mitzvah. You are mitzuveh to get this done. On the holiday Sukkot, you got to shake lulav and etrog. It's had nothing to do with your enjoyment. So even if the guy says, I'm making a neder, I'm not going to have any enjoyment from lulav and etrog, okay? But still, you got to shake it because the mitzvah of shaking lulav and etrog on Sukkot has nothing to do with hana'ah. Mitzvot have nothing to do with hana'ah. And yet, when he makes a neder that he's not going to have any hana'ah from this Gemara, the halacha is he's not allowed to use the Gemara. Why not? The same idea. The mitzvah is to learn, and mitzvot have nothing to do with hana'ah. From here you see, blatantly, says the Avnei Nezer and the Taz, that the mitzvah of lulav and etrog and the mitzvah of Torah are different mitzvot legamre. It's an amazing idea. Really amazing idea. Says the Avnei Nezer, you see from here that although the mitzvah of lulav and etrog is to get it done, the mitzvah of learning Torah, the essence, the chefts of the mitzvah, is not the learning of Torah. It's the enjoyment of learning. That's the mitzvah itself. That's the essence of the mitzvah itself. That's the chefts of the mitzvah, is the enjoyment of learning, not the act of learning. And therefore, if you made a neder not to shake lulav and etrog, you still shake it, because it's a mitzvah that has nothing to do with enjoyment. But when you make a neder not to learn from this book, you can't learn from the book, because the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is the enjoyment of learning. And if you made a neder not to have hana'ah, you lost the mitzvah itself from this book. Do you understand what we just hit on? Do you understand how Talmud Torah is separate and different from all 612 other mitzvot in the Torah? All other 612 mitzvot in the Torah, it's all about do it, get it done. And this mitzvah screams, enjoy it. Because if you're not enjoying it, you're not doing it. That's the essence of the mitzvah Talmud Torah. The whole objective of learning Torah is to have hana'ah from God's Torah. Hashem says, I want you to enjoy this. If I had to use a quick mashal, just as I'm thinking at the moment, I would say like it's a little bit closer to the idea of Oneg Shabbat. You see, Shabbat was given to us to watch and not to break. But that's only one side of Shabbat. There's Zachor and Shamor, right? Don't break it. But there's another side. Keep it. How do you keep it? Al Yedei Oneg. So just like there's a concept by the mitzvah of Shabbat called Oneg Shabbat, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah really is, says the Avnei Nezer, Oneg Torah. And if you don't have Oneg, you don't have Torah. And that's why, unlike lulav and etrog, that you made the neder not to have hana'ah from, and you can still shake it, because that mitzvah has nothing to do with hana'ah. Torah, the whole chefts of the mitzvah, the whole essence of the mitzvah, is oneg Torah. So if the guy made a neder that he's not going to have hana'ah from this Torah sefer, then he cannot learn, because that's the whole mitzvah. Wow. What an eye-opener. And look how far this is going to go now. If I might really take you as far as I can. If we're saying now that the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is different than all other mitzvot, that every other mitzvah is a mitzvah to do, but this is a mitzvah to enjoy, that means that we could actually get the shoulders to say, according to Avnei Nezer and the Taz, that the mitzvah of Torah is a mitzvat nehenin. And if that's the case, what type of bracha are you going to make on that? Birkat HaNehenin. Wow. Maybe now we can understand an amazing levush. Listen to this levush, Rabotai. This is something spectacular. This is a levush that we used 2 years ago on the night of Shavuot that we spent all night together. We were up all night that night together learning. We were Mekabel Torah 2 years ago on this levush. The levush writes, the famous Gemara Nedarim, Alma of the Haaretz. Why, after the Churban of the Bet HaMikdash, did we lose Eretz Yisrael? The Bet HaMikdash, I understand. But why did we lose Israel? Alma of the Haaretz. Why were we kicked out of Eretz Yisrael? Do you know that the Gemara says they went to the Chachamim, the Lo Pirshua. The rabbis didn't know the answer. They went to the Nevi'im, Lo Pirshua. They went to the Malachim, the angels. They went to the angels. They asked them this question. Why did we lose Israel? The Lo Pirshua. Ad Sheba Kadosh Baruch Hu. Until Hashem B'chvodo Ba'atzmo came. And he answered, Alma of the Haaretz. Al ozvam et Torati. Shelo birchu ba'Torah techila. You want to know why you lost Israel? You lost Israel because after the Churban, we got kicked out of Eretz Yisrael because we have forsaken God's Torah. What? How? Shelo bircha ba'Torah techila. Because you didn't make a blessing before you started learning every day. You didn't say daily, Birkat Torah. Really? So then why was it such a secret? You know, we could have just walked into shul and we could have realized that in the Sidurim on the shelf, you open up the Sidur by Birkat HaShachar, some clown came along and ripped out the pages of Birkat Torah. So nobody had the pages of Birkat Torah. No one blessed on Birkat Torah every morning, which is found at the end of the Birkat HaShachar. And we would have realized that the reason why we got kicked out of Israel is because we didn't make the Birkat Torah every day. And yet, they came to the rabbis, nope. Don't know the answer. They came to the Nevi'im, the prophets. Nope, don't know the answer. They came to the angels and didn't know the answer. Then they came to Hashem. And Hashem told us, you want to know why? Because he didn't bless on my Torah, Birkat Torah. So what was the secret? Why didn't we get that? Why couldn't we have answered that? Why couldn't we have answered that on our own? It's kind of blatant if everybody's not making Birkat Torah and skipping it in the book. Come on. And the answer is, says the Levush, you got it all wrong. When it says that they didn't make Birkat Torah, of course they did. They made the blessing. But they made the Birkat Torah as a Birkat Mitzvot when they were supposed to make it as a Birkat Neheni. How did you make that Birach on the Torah? Was it something that you had to just go through the emotions like other mitzvot? Did you understand that Torah was a steak? Do you understand that the essence of Torah is the enjoyment and the pleasure that you get out of learning Torah? And therefore, when you make a beracha on that enjoyment and pleasure, it's like making a beracha on the most delected, delicious, magnificent steak that you've ever eaten, the actual cote de boeuf itself. Did you understand what you're making a blessing on? They didn't bless on Torah a Birkat HaNehenin. They blessed on it a regular Birkat HaMitzvot. And because of that, Hashem says, if you don't realize how enjoyable and how delicious my Torah is, you're learning it out of routine, you're blessing on it just like another mitzvah, then you never blessed Torah in your life. shelo birchu al Torah. This is what he writes, the Levush. Torah is delicious. Torah was given to enjoy. Torah was meant to enjoy. Torah is an actual mitzvat nehenin. It was given lehanot nitnu. This mitzvah was given for your enjoyment purposes. And therefore the blessing you're going to make on it is a beracha on food. It's birkat ne'enin. Knock yourself out. Enjoy it. That's what it was meant to be. It was meant to be a steak. So bless on it as a steak. In a spiritual way, of course. I'm not meaning chas v'shalom to bring down the magnificence of Torah to a mundane. What I mean to say is that you, the mensch, is supposed to be looking at it as something that I was coming to sink my teeth into, something I was coming to enjoy, something that was meant for my enjoyment purposes. And if that's the case, if you blessed it as a mitzvah and you didn't bless it as birkat ne'enin, you lost the entire mitzvah and its blessing. And because of that, we lost Israel as well. And then the Levush goes on to say something fantastic. He says every other mitzvah, generally, you either make a beracha before you do the mitzvah, or sometimes you make a beracha after you do the mitzvah. Beracha rishona, beracha aharona. Sometimes you'll do both. You'll have a mitzvah rishona, and then you'll have a mitzvah aharona. He says, but where did you find such an interesting thing that you look at Birkat Torah in the morning and you have two berachot? Where do you ever find two berachot rishonot on any mitzvah? We have the beracha. Well, it depends on Sfaradim, Ashkenazim, exactly what the Lashon. Al divrei Torah, or la'asok b'divrei Torah. And then the second blessing, Asher b'harbanu mikol hamim. What's going on here? Why are we making two blessings on one mitzvah? Says the Levush, by nehenin, by food, many times, especially chashuv food, we find a beracha rishona and beracha harona. For instance, the staple of all foods, bread. We have a hamotzi, and then of course we have birkat hamazon. He says the two blessings that you make in the morning before you start your day of birkat Torah is really, one is a beracha rishona, and one is a beracha aharona from yesterday's Torah learning. The first beracha, birkat Torah you're making is a beracha aharona from yesterday's Torah. And the second beracha you're making is the beracha rishona of the coming day's Torah. Wait 1 second. So if I'm making a beracha aharona on yesterday's Torah, then I should have made it yesterday when I finished learning. Yesterday when I finished my night seder, I should have pulled out a siddur and I would have made the blessing. Esek Torah, Divrei Torah, whatever the Lashon that we say, Al Divrei Torah, La'asok b'Divrei Torah, whichever Lashon you say. But you should have said it like any beracha harona. You finish eating, you make birkat hamazon. You finish learning, you make birkat hamazon. Meaning you make the beracha harona. And yet, why do we make it the next morning? Says the Levush, I'll tell you why. Because there's no other way to do it. Because you have an obligation to learn every single minute of the day as long as you're awake. And that means that every second, right up until the moment before you fall asleep, you're still mechuyav to learn more. So there's no way to make a beracha harona yet, because you're still obligated with the opportunity to continue to eat more and more Torah learning. And then, when does it stop? When you sleep. When you sleep through the night, that's the hefsek. That stops yesterday's Torah chiyuv. So when do you make the beracha harona? The first possible time that you can do it is the minute you wake up the next morning. The minute you wake up next morning, you come out of the hefsek of yesterday's Torah, you make the beracha harona, which is the first blessing of Birkat Torah, and then you make a second blessing on Birkat Torah, which is the beracha rishona of the coming day's learning. Do you see how much of a stake this is? Do you understand that the poskim are telling you that the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is different than all other mitzvot? All other mitzvot is mitzvot that you need to get to do, whereas the essence of Talmud Torah is a mitzvah nehenin. It's a mitzvah that you get to enjoy. That's the essence of the actual learning of the mitzvah. Ad kedei kach that the Levush is telling me that even the berachot that you're making on Talmud Torah is birkat hanehenin. It's not birkat hamitzvot. And that's why I need a beracha rishona and a beracha harona. And that's why I make 2 berachot in the morning, a birkat Torah, a harona from yesterday, and rishona for the coming day. You understand what we're saying here? It's delicious. It was meant to enjoy. Hashem says, come and sink your teeth in with me. Let's enjoy this kid together. It's meshivat nafesh. It's something that gives you this exhilarating feeling and fills up the black hole on the inside of emptiness that a Jew walks out of a good shir, he feels on cloud 9. Nothing gives you that exhilarating feeling. Nothing. The enjoyment of learning, there's nothing like it. Nothing like it. I remember when I was a bacher years ago, 28 years ago. Wow, man, where did time go? I remember 28 years ago. I was learning Yeshivat Itri, and I was already there for 3.5 years. I went through the machzor of all the Rebbes. The last year I was learning with my Rebbe, Reb Simcha Schiff. And we were learning already Chavruta because I was already in shir by him for 1.5 years. And I remember that summer, Tisha B'Av, I was in Israel. And that summer I'll never forget. Never forget. I came up to my Rebbe's house, Motzei Tisha B'Av. And I saw that he was sitting there in his study and learning. And the Rebbitzin was screaming, Reb Simcha, kum eshain, come and eat. I prepared for you. I said, Rebbe, you didn't break your tightness yet? It's already 10:30 at night. It was like the Tanit was over an hour and a half ago. You know, Rebbe, you didn't break your Tanit yet? He says, I did. I said, but the Rebbitzin said you didn't eat yet. Nah, I didn't eat yet, but I broke my Tanit. You see, that was the one day that there's more than just a food ta'anit going on. But you're not allowed to learn on Tisha B'Av. There was a Torah ta'anit going on. And to this rabbi, the Torah ta'anit was a much bigger strain than the food ta'anit. And he was counting down the hours for the ta'anit to be over to run back and grab a bite of a Tosafot, a bite of a Rashba, a bite of a Rashi, a bite of another sugya. To him, it was much more difficult, the ta'anit of learning, than the ta'anit of food, because this was meant to be la'aneg. That was the essence. That was the essence of the mitzvah of Torah, to enjoy it. To enjoy it. That's the ta'anit that killed him. Couldn't deal with it. You had to see the look on his face. I walked into that room. He looked like he was in cloud 9. He was going through the pages like someone who never saw food before in his life, and handed him this magnificent steak, this magnificent platter of hors d'oeuvres, of something, of delicacies, and he was ripping through it like I couldn't get enough of it. I was hungry. Meanwhile, inside on the dining room table, Kedera, Mamish, Sudat Melech. This is where I'm at. Here's the restaurant right here. It's unbelievable to see that, to see people like that. But That they understood what it is. It says Hashem, if you blessed on the Torah the way you blessed on regular mitzvot, that means you have no idea what Torah is. Shelo birchu b'Torah techila. Of course they made the blessings of Birkat Torah. But they did not understand that it was meant to be a Birkat Nehenin and not a regular Birkat Torah. That's the Lavush. And because of that, Hashem says, you don't know what my Torah is. And we lost Israel because of that. Because Torah, Israel, and Yisrael, Chadu, we're all one. And if you're missing one, you're missing the other. And therefore it makes a lot of sense now. Oh, I wanted to tell you one more Maisa. I just remembered now. When I was there that year in Itrion, that last year, me and my Chavruta, we decided we already went through all the Rebbes. And that last year we were learning Chavruta with the Rabbanim. We were already on the 4th chair. It was like the foot out, the year that generally people start dating, going into Kolel. So I remember that we did something that later on proved to be probably one of the best things we've ever done. We spent that last 6 months of winter's man, happened to have been in Bava Metzia. We went out every single week and we heard the Shir Klali of different Roshei HaYeshivot all over Israel. That gave me an opportunity to pick up and to see the real McCoy of the old generation before we lost him. I went to Rav Gustman. I heard his Shir Klali. I sat in his house once. I spoke to him one night in learning while he was playing chess with one guy, dictating a letter to another guy, and talking to me and learning, third guy, simultaneously at the same time. It was wild. Wild. I got to hear Shir Klali from the son of Reb Chanon Wasserman, Reb Simcha Wasserman. I got to hear Shir Klali by Rabbi Beryl Schwartzman, the Rosh HaYeshiva over there in Beis HaTalmud in Sanhedria, the son-in-law of Rabbi Aaron Kotler. I got to hear Shir Klali from Rabbi Yonason David in Pachad Yitzchak out in Har Nov. I got to hear I went around to hear the greats. I wanted to hear the greatest of the greats of the generation living at that time and soak up as much as I can to pick up the different styles, the different gadlut of Torah. I wanted to feel, I wanted to taste it. I wanted to taste the delicacies of the different giant chefs of Gedolei Torah of Klal Yisrael. I want to taste their food. I went all over, me and my Chavruta. And one time, I'll never forget, we ran downstairs to the payphone. We put in an asimon. I don't even know if you know what I'm talking about. There was these little coins that, all right. Anyways, we put in the asimon. We called Panovich, because on the side of the payphone in yeshiva, the directory that they have on the wall are the phone numbers of all other yeshivot in Israel. Every yeshiva did that. If you wanted to call a friend in another yeshiva, you know how to catch him. We called Panovich in Bnei Brak. And we asked, that day was Thursday. We asked, what is Reb Shach giving on today? What's Shir Klali? What's the sugi he's giving on? So some Israeli guy from Panovich answers the phone on the other side of Bnei Brak. And he says, we're holding now in the sugi of Dav Dalet, Slaim Dinrin, Dalet Amud Bet. And here are the Marmakomot. And the guy was very nice. He ran. He brought the Marmakomot and he read it off over the phone. And we sat there in Yerushalayim on the other end with a notebook. And we wrote down all the Marmakomot. This is the share that Reb Shach is giving today. That morning for Seder, me and my Chavruta, Yitzchak Mandelkorn, we ran upstairs. We learned together all the Marmakomot. We prepared the sugya. We prepared the share. And then at 11 o'clock, we went to Rehov Strauss. We jumped into a sherut, 7-man sherut, going out to Bnei Brak every 15 minutes. Every 15 minutes. Oh, those were the days. Those were the days. Those were the days. Those were the days. I wouldn't trade those days, those years for nothing. At the time we didn't appreciate it, but it's like everything in life. At the time that you have it, you don't appreciate it until you no longer have it. That's just life. When do we get that wake-up call? So jump into the taxi. We went out to Bnei Brak. We made it to Panovich. We came walking in the Bet Midrash where Reb Shach walked in. The place was mobbed. The place was packed. I'm talking about packed. Over 1,000 guys. Reb Shach makes his way up the steps in front of the famous golden Aron Kodesh of Panovich. You remember the famous picture with his hands in the air? That's a Sher Klali. That's the way Reb Shach used. It was a war. He came out with the boxing gloves, Kiviyachol. He came out fighting. Reb Shach gets up and starts giving over the sugya. I'll never forget, he closes his eyes and he starts saying over the sugya. And he starts going into Rishonim and Aharonim, and then of course the Rambam, Reb Shach's forte. And he started going one mahalach and another mahalach. And in the front row, right in front, the first 2 rows, right in front of the podium, in the front of the Bet Midrash, apparently that's where the heavy hitters of Panovich sat. Because all the questions and all the guys that were trying to upslug the share were sitting in those front 2 rows. And they started bombing questions. And Reb Shach was up there like a lion tamer. He was answering them, knocking them out one after the other. Unbelievable. It was something to see. This was something to see. And then Reb Shach continues on. And he goes till 1 o'clock. Then he goes to 1:30. And he goes to 2 o'clock. Nobody's moving. And I'm sitting there and I remember that Sheikh Lali starts at 12:20, whatever it was. And it goes for an hour, 1:20, 10 minutes Musar, 20 minutes Musar. Mincha's 1:45. Lunch is 2 o'clock. It's already 2 o'clock. It's already 2 o'clock. 2:15, 2:30. 3 o'clock, Reb Shach is going strong. And he's not saying his eyes are closed. He didn't open up his eyes. He was right. And nobody moved, over 1,000 guys. It's already almost 3 hours into the share. Nobody moved. Until suddenly, out of the blue, Reb Shach catches himself. He opens his eyes. And he looks up. And he sees the time. It's after 3. He was supposed to be done a little over 2 hours ago. Reb Shach says, he starts to apologize to the tzibur. And he says, "Sei mir schuldig. I'm sorry. Ich bin azoi wie a sikel." I'll never forget that. Because Reb Shach, he had a hard time saying the shin. Everything was, "Ich bin azoi wie a sikel." I'm like a drunk. Ich steh auf in farm bottle. I forgot exactly how he said it. On kegen, or whatever he said. I'm standing in front of the bottle. I can't hold myself. What he was saying was that he's standing in front of such a tzibur that he couldn't hold himself. He didn't realize the time. He didn't realize the time. I'm like a drunk. When it comes to Torah, says Reb Shach, I'm like a drunk. I'm drunk on it. I'm standing in front of the bottle. I can't help myself. I didn't realize the time. That's the way Torah was meant to be. It was meant to be oneg Torah, like oneg Shabbat. Everybody understands oneg Shabbat. You take a look Friday afternoon in the stores, you'll see they're mahader and oneg Shabbat like nobody's business. You walk into any good store, you'll see, wow, what's going on in these people's shopping carts. Oneg Shabbat ad la shamayim. That was meant to be oneg Torah. The essence of Torah was a mitzvat nehenin. And the birachot, the birkat Torah, was a birkat ha-nehenin, says the Lavush. That's why there's 2 birachot. Biracha aharona for yesterday's, and the second blessing is biracha rishona for the coming days Torah. That's unbelievable. And that's why it makes a lot of sense that we put a lot of emphasis on the food of Shavuot. We have 1 meal dairy. I know here in the community we love making barbecues. The second day, everybody's making a barbecue. And I'll tell you where they get the barbecues from. I think I found the makor. There's a famous Gemara in Pesachim, Samechet Amud Bet. The Gemara says over there, Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef, the famous Gemara, said Rabbi Yosef, Biyoma di atzarta, on the day of Shavuot. What did Rabbi Yosef tell them? Avdili Igla tilta. Make me the most choice of all lamb chops. I want you to make me the best of the best steaks. Igla tilta means, there's a whole machloket there. It doesn't mean the third baby calf, which is the most delicate meat, or does it mean it's the third one down from the line from the mother, whatever. But it means the most magnificent and delicate meat. Igla tilta. Give me the third line calf, the best, most choice lamb chops, steaks, meat that anyone has ever tasted. Today, Yuma Atzarta, on the day of Atzeret, on the day of Shavuot, make me the best steak you got. Why? Says Rabbi Yossi, I'll tell you why. Ilav hayoma, because if not for this day, what would be with me? What would be with me? Harbe Yosef ika beshuka. There would be a lot. I would, not to say this chasham, but he would have been another Joe. Right, Joe? He would have been just another Joe. He says, but because of this day, I'm not just another Joe. I'm Rabbi Yosef. This day made me. I'm Rabbi Yosef. Wow. Listen to what he's telling you. He's telling you that Torah was meant, Rashi writes over there on that Gemara, says Rashi, on this day, Avdeli Igla Tilta, says Rashi, Ilav Hayoma, says Rashi, Shvenit Romamti. This day raised me up and gave me my purpose to live. It made me who I am. It gave me life. It gave me what to live for. It gave me enjoyment. Give me the best steak you have, because that's only going to celebrate the most delicious of gifts that Borei Olam gave us. Rabotai, I want to share with you a moment. Wow. The Gaon. And I'm hoping you never forget this Gaon. I heard this Gaon as well from Rabbi Gladstein, as long as all the Marmikomot. The Gaon writes in Aderet Eliyahu that there are in Klal Yisrael mitzvot sheben adam lechavero, ben adam lamakom. Everybody knows that. Says the Gaon, but you're missing a category. He says there isn't just two categories. There are three. Everyone thinks there's two categories. That's what everyone thinks. Ben adam lamakom, right? Let's say tefillah, ben adam lamakom. And then there's gemilut chasadim, right? Ben adam lechavero, right? I mean, that's what everyone thinks, right? Lo tirtzach is an avera ben adam lechavero, right? Whereas, other averot, avodah zara, is ben adam lamakom, right? Says the Gaon wrong. There are three categories, not two. Three categories, not two. Really, what's the third category? He says the first category, ben adam lamakom. Second category, ben adam lechavero. Third category, ben adam le'atzmo. Says the Gaon, listen to me well. This world, we just finished Pirkei Avot, the world was built on three legs. Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim. Says the Gaon, keneged these three legs, there are the three Gimel Averot Chamurot. What are the Gimel Averot Chamurot? That is Arayot, Avodah Zarah, Shvichut Damim. These three are keneged these three. Listen to what the Gaon is about to tell you now. These three and these three are actually the three categories of Ben Adam Lechavero, Ben Adam Lamakom, Ben Adam Le'atzmo. Listen to this. Each one represents a mitzvah and an avera of that category. He says, Ben Adam Lamakom. He says, well, that's avodah. You're talking to Hashem, tefillah. Avodah. Who are you serving, Mechi? The Eibishter, Borei Olam. Ben Adam Lamakom. So avodah is the mitzvah Ben Adam Lamakom. What is the avera Ben Adam Lamakom that corresponds? Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah. You are cheating on God. Forgive me for talking that way. But you are literally going against Hashem. That's Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah corresponds to Avodah. Avodah is the mitzvah Ben Adam Makom. Avodah Zarah Avera Ben Adam Makom. Wow. Okay, beauty. Weiter. Okay, ben adam lechavero. Oh, ben adam lechavero, gemilut chasadim. So gemilut chasadim is the mitzvah that represents ben adam lechavero. And the aveira that represents ben adam lechavero is shvichut damim. You kill another person. It's the worst thing you can do to a guy. You take away his life. You take away his potential. You take away everything he had. So the mitzvah of the second category of ben adam lechavero is gemilut chasadim. The aveira of the second category is ritzicha, shvichut damim. He says, but then there's a third category. Ben adam le'atzmo. He says the aveira that destroys a person. The aveira that a person does that literally rips himself apart and decays himself to shreds is arayot. He's mashpil himself al yedei arayot. He destroys himself al yedei arayot. It's a self-decaying sickness, arayot. Well, if that's the aveira of ben adam la'atzmai, so what's the mitzvah of ben adam la'atzmo? Torah. Torah is the third category, which is not ben adam la'makom. It's ben adam la'atzmo. It's a mitzvat hanehenin. It's birkat hanehenin. This was meant for you and yourself to enjoy. Says Rashi, Ilav hayuma. Says Rashi, v'nitromanti. This is what made me. This is what gave me purpose. It gave me life. It gave me enjoyment. This gave me a direction. It gave me an erech. It made me a ben aliyah. It gave me worth. I am a person of worthiness now because I have a Torah in me, encapsulated in me. That's what a Talmid Chacham is. Talmid Chacham is someone who has a Sefer Torah encapsulated inside of him. When he walks into the room, you know why you stand up? You get up because he has a Sefer Torah encapsulated inside him. So the same way you get up for a Sefer Torah, when it comes out of the Aron, you get up for a Talmid Chacham that walks into the room because he has Sefer Torah, Aron Bifnim. You understand what it did for you, this Torah? You know how it raised you up? Harbe Yosef Ika Beshuka. I could have been another Joe. You know what this did for me? It made me a Ben Adam. It took me away from the Behema Sheba Adam, and it made me a Adam Sheba Adam. It made me a mensch. Don't ever forget this Gaon. How can you forget this Gaon? This is Gaon. This is Gaonut. This is genius. 3 things the world stands on, 3 things the world crumbles on. Zelumat zeh. These are the 3 categories of Jews, of man, of Klal Yisrael. Ben Adam lechaverai, Ben Adam lamakom, uben Adam le'atzmo. Arayot destroys a person's self. Torah builds up like nothing else a person's self. And no wonder Torah is the elixir and the antidote for arayot. No wonder, because they actually are zelu matzeh. They are actually, this one destroys the person, this one rebuilds the person. It's miromem. Rashi says, minit romanti. It's miromem the person. And therefore, let me close with this. I wanted to close with a story tonight of the Romanian bulldog. I've said it over many times, but I realize how late it is. I don't think I'm going to have the time to say it tonight. So maybe I'll say it Wednesday night, Bezat Hashem. The Romanian bulldog. Yeah, well, we'll say it Wednesday night. I have 10 minutes left, and that's a 25-minute story. Yeah. That's a series. It's not even a story. But I do want to just end off and tell you this. This is something very special. I just want to end off. I want you to hear this. So here's my big ending to the erech of a mensch, and how Torah was so delicious, and how Torah was meant to be for you. Like the famous Rugged Rebbe that says, when I daven, I speak to God, and when I learn, Hashem speaks to me. This was meant for you. This was meant to build you up. Without it, we're lost. Without it, we're not just lost in life. We're lost inside. We're so confused. And we're so lost and empty without purpose. The Torah is what makes us. Listen to this amazing thing. So here's my close. And remember, hold me. Wednesday night, we're going to do the Romanian Bulldog. Bezat Hashem. Bli neder. So a guy comes home. And he tells his wife. I just heard this from Rabbi Yaakov. A guy comes home and tells his wife, I just bought 2 hotels. She says, what? He says, yeah. Yeah, we made it. After all these years. You believed in me. I made it. I am now a success story. I just bought 2 hotels. She said, no way. I can't believe it. She jumps. My husband. He says, yeah, that's right. That's right. I just bought 2 hotels. Matter of fact, honey, get a load of this. The 2 hotels I just bought, they're on the boardwalk. What? How did you get oceanfront? He says, honey, we're doing so well now that after I bought these 2 hotels on the boardwalk, just today I made $1 million. What? One day? You made $1 million? He said, yes, $1 million. She was going crazy like any wife that would want to start living up a little bit in life. And she's starting to picture herself in one of these hotels on the ocean front. And she's walking around like the semi-partner of the hotel. This is my husband's hotel. It's a very different walk when you walk around the place. This is my husband's establishment, so he's chatzi partner, right? Shali v'shalachem shalahi, right? So she's already picturing the fantasies of laying on the beach in front of the hotels, and the money is rolling in. This was finally the lifestyle she was waiting for. And he says, that's right, I made $1 million today on those 2 hotels on the boardwalk. And he says, I'm going to show it to you to prove it to you. And he reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out a stack of $1 million in Monopoly money. And she says, what? What's that? He says, what do you mean? It's $1 million. She says, yeah, but it's Monopoly money. She says, yeah, well, yeah. Where did you think I bought the hotels? I bought 2 hotels and I put it on boardwalk. She said, what? She said, yeah. I didn't say anything wrong. Did he lie? He didn't lie. Every single word he said was true. He did not put the 2 hotels on Waterworks. He did not put the 2 hotels on Indianapolis. He put it not on the railroad. He put it on Boardwalk. He says, yeah, this time I bought Boardwalk. And I put 2 hotels. And everyone was landing on me. And just today, I got $1 million. Take a look at this. Take a look at that. Welcome to the life of many young boys who never grew up. And they run around chasing a currency of another hotel, and another this, and another building, and another that. And this is it. And now I'm going to make it. And this is my moment. And this is my success. And this is my claim to fame. And now they're going to get up for me in shul. And now I'm going to be allowed into the circles of the elite. And now I'm going to be able to hang out with the jet set. And now I'm going to be able to go on those incredible dream vacations, destination vacations. And they're going to start talking about me. And I'm going to drive down Ocean Parkway in a convertible with the hood down and the music blaring 10 miles an hour. Yeah. You're looking at it. Yeah, you're looking at it. That's right. It's me. You never thought I'd make it. I made it. It's a game. It's a big game. And so many people lost their sense to the game of Monopoly. And they're chasing a currency that doesn't have value beyond the board. And And at the end of the day, they gave everything for that game. And all did they realize that when the day is up and the chips are cashed, you can't take anything beyond the board. And he's going to come up to Shamayim and they're going to say, so? And he's going to say, I had 2 hotels on Main Street. I own trophy buildings in the city. And they're going to say, okay, but where are you coming here with? Because here that currency doesn't fly. Here that currency doesn't fly. Let's wake up quickly. It's a few days to Matan Torah. Let's reignite inside of us the love for the purpose that was given to us in the world, to be able to get a life of such enjoyment, of such pleasure. Everybody wants pleasure. Everyone wants enjoyment. The problem is they're looking at the wrong boards. Come back to Klal Yisrael. Come back to the Torah. Come back to a Rebbe. Come back to a Chabura. You know, we're sitting here learning in the morning with a bunch of guys from 9 to 11:30. And you know, don't get me wrong. I see sometimes that they get calls, and it's hard. You got an appointment, you got a this, you got a buyer, you're pulling. But at the end of those 2 hours, they walk out of this room rich. You could see it on their faces. They look like they made $1 million, these guys. They walk out full. They walk out literally as if you stuffed them like a goose and fed them well. And they walk out with a smile. And they say, all right, now I can go out. Now I can conquer the world. Because now I feel that I'm not just another Joe. I feel that I'm starting my day with such an uplifted feeling, with a sweetness of learning. These guys walk out on a high. Could you imagine if you could make that every day of your life? We're coming back now to the recharge. Another Matan Torah, another year. This is the time that we say, Borei Olam, what you gave us was delicious. I'm thanking you on the Beracha Aharona of this past year's Torah, and I'm going to make you a new bracha with a new promise, with a new conviction, with a new commitment for the Torah that's delicious for this coming year. Thank you for listening.